This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Thursday, May 26th edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Fornatale, back with you, joined by the usual crew, Mike Hogan and Jonathon Kinchen. Gentlemen, what's up?
Just another day of getting paid to talk about horses running around in circles, so it's a good thing.
What's up with you, Jonathon?
No, nothing. I was sitting here laughing because every time we start this off, you always say, "What's up, gentlemen?" and I always defer to Mike to go first. And then he always takes like 3 or 4 seconds, and I start to panic, like, "Oh," I start to talk. Then he eventually chimes. Then he eventually chimes in, and then it gets to me. So.
Maybe I should do one and then the other. I could go, Mike, what's up? Also joining us, that's probably better. I think this is you guys are okay. This is a hashtag host fail. I'll do better in the next time. You're absolutely right. I can't do that.
It's funny you say that, Jonathan, because it's exactly what that pause means on my end.
Yeah, I can hear it. I could hear the awkwardness to it. It's my fault. It's been happening for months, and now I will finally do something about it. It's just the way things go. I emphasize that this is a Thursday pod, not our usual day to do the pod, and that is going to lead to the show being different today. Instead of going over the public handicapper races, which haven't been announced yet, because of our schedules with the holiday weekend, we are going to do more of an evergreen show. We're going to talk about some of the things that are going on the podcast right now. We're going to answer a couple of questions that came in via Twitter, and we're just going to sort of spitball it, and hopefully this will be one folks can come back to. We were looking at metrics this week, Mike and I were. Yes, there are metrics for the DRF Players Podcast. We were slightly overwhelmed by how many of you there are out there. If I sound a little nervous today, it's probably because of that. But we were also surprised to see that folks do go back and listen through the archive. So perhaps this will be a show. Maybe you're not listening to this over Memorial Day weekend 2016. Maybe it's already the fall. Maybe the Saratoga meet's in the books, and you're coming back and you just want to see what we were talking about on a random Thursday in May. So hello to that crazy person. But, all right, where will we begin? Why don't we begin with something we didn't talk about in our Preakness recap show earlier in the week, and that is where we stand with our little draft of horses for this Triple Crown season. Because actually, even though I had declared myself the winner after running first and third in the Derby, subsequent results have brought that into question. Mike, where are we in the standings right now?
Well, it's essentially a two-horse race between you and me, Pete. You have Nyquist and Gunrunner, so Nyquist got 20 points in winning the Derby and 5 points in running third in the Preakness. 5 points for Gunrunner running third in the Derby gives you 30 points total. You got no points for Whitmore, My Man Sam, or Mohayman. And it sounds like you might not get any more points for any of those runners in the Belmont unless things change as far as the probables go.
A heater is the best I can hope for? Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps. I don't know. We'll see. I have 10 points for Exaggerator's second place finish in the Derby and 20 points for his win in the Preakness, which ties me with you for 30 in the lead. And it looks like I won't have anybody else but Exaggerator in the Belmont because I have More Spirit, Dancing Candy, Outwork, and Mahesto as well.
So my next question, now, can either of the other two entrants, either Chris Larmy or Jonathon Kinchen, can they run 1, 2, 3 and have a chance to beat us, or what? What's the story like looking at Kinchen's record and Larmy's record versus who's going to be showing up in New York in a couple of weeks? What are we looking at here?
Well, both Jonathan and Chris are sitting with bagels right now. Brody's Cause, Stradivari, Motom, Lauban, and Cupid have not gotten a single point for Mr. Kinchen, and I don't know if any of them are planning on running in Belmont in the Belmont as a lock. There have been some that have been talked about, but I haven't heard for sure of any of those 5 running. So, Jonathan, you're going to need at least 2 to run. You're going to need to run at least 1, 2 to eke out a tie, and 1, 2, 3 to leapfrog. It's looking pretty grim for you, sir.
No,
I'm not
Mo
worried.
Tom-
I'm not worried about Kinchen at all. Jonathon's told me many times he doesn't have any come from behind wins on his resume. So you're clearly out of it, right, Jonathan?
No, Mo Tom and Brody's Cause are going to run 1-2 in the exacta. One of them is going to wire the field. That was my tweet today to Mike and everyone else, that I would think that one of them is going to add blinkers, and then here we go.
Okay, well, so then you have to hope Exaggerator does not run third, and then we have a three-way tie if that happens. Chris is looking.
One-turn horse.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, your one-turn horse. We'll get back to that in a minute.
Of any of the off-the-pace runners, Chris is looking like the one with potentially the most to gain here in Destin and Sudden Breaking News, who have been talked about as likely for the Belmont. Also Creator, who I haven't really seen one way or another, but may end up going. It looks like Unified is not going to be going to the Belmont, instead going to the Pegasus Stakes at Monmouth Park, and Shaggoff is out for a while with an injury. So, Chris, I guess best case scenario for you, sir, is some sort of Destin Creator Sudden Breaking News try in the Belmont, and then you leapfrog both of us.
It could be interesting to see this. Jonathon famously, or infamously perhaps, made the analogy about letting Chris into the contest late was like having a fight with a girl. Jonathon, you might be about to get your butt kicked by a girl. How do you feel about that?
I know. I feel like I have some, I've got a lot of emails from government agencies telling me that I wasn't allowed to say that. So I should probably. I'm hoping that he wins and everyone will forget about it.
There you go. Fair enough. I'm upset though. I think that I'm in real trouble here. And Mike is going to win his second straight bobblehead, but I think since we never gave him the first bobblehead, that is kind of a just result. So we'll have to see what happens. Let's talk about the race for 2 seconds. A pet peeve of mine trying to handicap these races that we don't even know who's going to show up or what the prices are going to be. But hey, it's a podcast. We're paid to talk about this stuff. So Mike's idea of discussing it is probably more appropriate. I know that Exaggerator has been, beaten at 13 lengths minimum at the first call of his last couple of races, but this is a horse who has won on the lead. Why do we think he's not just going to show speed in Belmont?
I think you're right. Actually, I think I looked at the Moss Pace figures and compared his Moss Pace, because my reaction was, okay, when I saw this field of the current probables, and we can add in Governor Malibu, is that his name? We can add him to the list because I think it's likely that Christophe Clement will send him. And we know he's done well going from the Peter Pan to the Belmont Stakes, so he could be a player in here.
Yeah.
Yes, we have. But the field so far of probables is Exaggerator, Creator, Cherry Wine, Lonnie, Destin, Sudden Breaking News, Brody's Cause, and Mo Tom. None of them is really what you would call a front runner. However, so I first thought, oh boy, Destin's the one who's shown the most early speed, but then I looked at the Moss Pace figures, and you're right, Pete. Exaggerator lines up pretty well against Destin just on the flat numbers, especially if you go back to the Delta Jackpot or certainly the San Vicente. He can be handy enough to be out there or pretty close early.
Something, Mike. Where did you get were you just looking at old PPs and looking what the Moss Pace figures were, or is there a way you can now access, for example, what Exaggerator's pace lines on Moss were in the Preakness?
Yeah, old PPs. I mean, my setting is I want Moss Pace figures in my formulator PPs, so if I look at any horses through, say, trainer patterns, I click on Todd Pletcher, I find Destin, I click on Destin's lifetime PPs from the trainer stats, I get the Moss Pace figures there. I do the same with Keith DeSormo, or I could go back to that Pimlico card, which I had already handicapped, click on the Preakness, look at the Derby chart, and then click on Exaggerator from the Derby chart. It brings up his lifetime PPs that way as well.
But you're not seeing the Moss lines from the Preakness, though.
No, right. You're not seeing it in a chart view necessarily.
That would be just my 2 cents. If anyone from our excellent product team is listening, how cool would it be if you could have those Moss lines somehow accessible via the charts in Formulator the same way you can go and look at the buyers, I think that would help a lot of us in doing our race review to get another perspective on how the race was run and seeing those Moss lines right in the charts. And then you could have sort of more, for the kind of analysis you're doing, Mike, on the pace for this race, you don't necessarily need every line, but it would be kind of cool, especially with lightly raced horses. Do you know if that's something that's been discussed at all within DRF?
Oh, I don't know if that particular thing has been discussed, but I know we've discussed better ways to serve up certain reports, be it the Moss pace figures or the buyer figures or things like that. So it's definitely one we can add to the list, and I like that idea.
Jonathon, what do you think? What's your early thought on, whose biases aside, early thought on what's going to happen in the Belmont Stakes?
No, it's a similar feel to kind of what we talked about the last podcast with Stradivari, is that, listening to other people's knocks, and on Stradivari it was that he was lightly raced coming into the Preakness, so you would think that he could improve out of that race. The same thing being said for Destin, except that this was actually one of my knocks on Destin, was that long break was too much for him, leading into the Derby, and now he's got that race underneath his belt. He's a forwardly, he's a horse that has shown the ability to be forwardly placed, and I think that he would be one that you would want to consider moving forward, especially in a paceless Belmont.
Seems like a sensible way of looking at the world, for sure. My Belmont tickets arrived the other day. I'm very excited. Going to be hanging out there. Susan and a bunch of her friends are excited to go. My friend Hurricane Anthony is going to be out there with some of his crew. He's always a hoot. Hopefully we can meet up out there and have some drinks and have a good time. I'm actually looking forward to a non-Belmont Stakes Belmont. Or not
to be too sentimental, Pete, but that will be our 2-year anniversary of meeting in person.
That's a good point. That's a good point. You were stuck out in that tent out back. You should. I've got the chocolates have already been ordered. I'm looking forward to getting a chance to celebrate with you in person, Jonathon, and perhaps sharing a steak at Peter Luger at some stage.
Absolutely.
Always a good time. Those 2 days before Belmont, there's sort of a Christmas Eve vibe. Everybody's excited, especially, I guess, in the Triple Crown years. But even just in general, you've got industry people from all over there. And, I enjoy a day out at Belmont Park. I think that backyard is beautiful. I love the ivy. I love the paddock. A lot of times you go out there and you feel like you're sitting in an airplane hangar. Not so those days, because even though it's far from filled, there's just good vibes and good energy because of all the people out there. Actually, Mike, that was the only time I think you and I have ever been at a race course together, too, was last year on whatever that was, the Thursday or the Friday before Belmont. Do you anticipate being able to get out there again this year?
I sure hope so, I should mention this is as good a time as any, since I will not be here next week on the podcast. You guys will have to soldier on without me because
I don't know, Mike. You're the Iron Man. You're the Iron Man of this thing. It was going to fall apart without you. Are you sure you don't want to call in?
Boy, I don't know.
I'm just kidding. I wouldn't allow you to do that if you wanted to. You need a vacation. The man works tirelessly.
It's not going to be much of a vacation because I'm taking the week off to move the family out from Manhattan to Forest Hill, so I'm going to be quite a bit closer to Belmont now. Just a short LIRR ride from our place to Belmont Park. So we'll be moved next week. I won't be around. You guys will be doing this without me, and then the week after that, hopefully we'll be settled in. Maybe at least one of those days. I can jump out there, if not both. So we'll see.
That would be fun. That would be fun. It's always a good time, and I'm looking forward to it. Belmont, of course, one of racing's big days. Racing's big days are the topic of the next thing I'm going to just spring on my my co-host here. It's the topic of a new book written by legendary handicapping author and I have a little sort of Mount Rushmore of my handicapping heroes, and Steve Davidowitz's face is on it. His book, Betting Thoroughbreds, one of the first ones I read that really got me excited about the art and the science of handicapping. His new book, all about betting on racing's biggest days. You're going to be hearing a lot about it on the podcast. We're going to be having Steve on at some point. In fact, maybe he'd be a good person to have on next week, since we need another able-bodied handicapper with Mike moving to Forest Hills. But the other thing, I was kind of amazed by was the cover of this book. I have read the whole thing, some really good insights in there, some really cool stuff about the specifics of how it's different to attack the big pools and big fields and top-class racing on the biggest days. The jacket of the book mentions some of the other handicappers featured therein, and it's a little bit like that game that used to be in your kids show, Sesame Street or whatever it was in the morning, like which of these things doesn't belong, because it talks about insights from handicappers like Andy Beyer, sure, I get that, he's on Mount Rushmore too, Stephen Christ, sure, I get that, and then the third name, Jonathon Kinchen. Jonathan, who did you pay to get your name on the cover of Steve Davidowitz's book?
Look, I don't know. You showed me that when we were at Santa Anita, and I thought maybe it was the drinks that Arcadia had served me, and it was a joke, and everyone, because there'd be someone jump out of the bathroom there at the Logan with a camera and get my reaction. I'll be honest. This is almost embarrassing to say, but I graduated from University of Texas. I did well enough in school, but not great. Steve Davidowitz's book was the first book I read all the way through in my entire life. It was Cliff Notes and getting by on pop quizzes all the way through school. And that was the first book that I read all the way through that I ordered hours after I won my $5 across the board on Giacomo that I've talked about, which got me hooked. And when he asked me for some, to write him something and to answer some of these questions that he had asked me to do, I took it extremely seriously. I mean, I literally went to a coffee shop and wrote these in-depth answers. I think he even told me that, oh, this is much longer than I was expecting. And so I think maybe just by default, by the effort that I put into it, he gave me a little bit of credit and threw my name there. But one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me in the sport, and it's a pretty big honor.
I'm kidding around, of course, about your name not belonging. I mean, the stuff you wrote was fantastic. You bring a new perspective and give a chance to give a little bit of props to tournaments and your very aggressive and somewhat unique approach to cash play. The stuff you have in there is fantastic. Also some terrific handicapping insights. And the book is a must-read. And like I said, we're going to be talking about it a whole lot on the show. Mike, we have anything interesting planned on the marketing side that you know of for the book, or have you had a chance to check it out yet?
No, I didn't even know it was published, and I wrote something for the addendum, so I'm excited to see it. I'll have to maybe peek around and see if we have any copies in the office, because I'm eager to see it as well.
Well, we'll be talking about it a whole bunch in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully have a chance maybe to do a giveaway and some other fun stuff with Steve and company. Before we move on to talking about the questions that were submitted to us by a couple of listeners via Twitter, I want to talk about another contest, the contest that we announced on the last show, which is the Daily Racing Form Players Podcast, a Bad Beat contest. Now, Jonathan, did you after you left the other day, I'm guessing you haven't had a chance to go back yet and hear what Harvey Pack had to say?
I haven't heard what Harvey has said, but I have got to read some of the stories that have been emailed in, and it's one of those things that's it's really painful to read them. I'm like,
we've had some, in the best possible way, real groaners, and we thank folks for sending in. We're going to continue to accept entries through next Wednesday, so feel free. Some folks have been sending in on Twitter, but I think it's going to be really hard to win on Twitter because just how elaborate some of these stories are. Feel free to let us know. We want to feel your pain. We want to get the sympathy and empathy out there in the world. So if you want to tweet at us about your bad beats, that's fine. But if you want a chance to win, please go ahead and send it to podcast@drf.com. And I think in addition to having the main prize, which is going to be a signed copy of May the Horse Be With You and $100 in site credit at the new DRF tournament site, we're going to have, I think, the winner and a couple of the runner-ups on the show. We might have to do a special, maybe another weekend like this Memorial Day weekend where we don't have time to handicap really by the time we have to record. We could do a special show and have folks on to tell their stories, because I really think, I mean, we could blog about it, but there's not really a place for that content to live on the site effectively. And I think that these stories, as good as they are on paper, they're going to be even better when we can hear the pain in your voice as you tell us about the time that you were robbed. I know I have a story I'm eager to share. Funny enough, a story that took place at Fair Hill in Maryland, where I'm hoping to get tomorrow, though I just got an email from my wife that's making it sound like Fair Hill may not be happening. My niece's track meet, which I am also very excited to see, happening at the same time. I think that's going to probably win out over Fair Hill. But at least I can tell you my story of pain from years ago. I assume you guys will both have contributions when we do a Bad Beat show? Mike?
The only problem is trying to figure out which one to use. I certainly don't have any bad beats that can compete with the one that Harvey was talking about.
Oh, that was fantastic.
But I've had any number of DQ horses, ones where I was on the wrong ends of horses that won but were DQ'd, as well as ones where there was an inquiry and the public opinion, at least based on what I saw on Twitter, felt like it should have gone with the change, and they left it as it stood, and I, would have done well if there was a change. So I've got a few of those. It's just a matter of figuring out what to tell, but sure.
Jonathon, what about you? Do you know what your story would? Don't tell it now, but do you know, is it an easy thing? Like, I knew right away, okay, that's the story for this. Do you have one, or do you have to sift through the possibilities like Mike?
Yeah, no, I think I have to sift through. I feel like I have one every darn weekend. So,
and Jonathon, I don't know if you're like me, where you have to, in some ways, you have to just forget about them and move on, and not keep reminding yourself and not dwell on them. So, in addition to trying to pick one, in some cases, I have to even try and remember.
That's a good point. Some are indelible, though.
No, obviously. I think that what makes the Bad Beat story so great when you're getting ready to write one in, it's not so much about the fact that you got beat, but I think it's more like how you got beat. I think that's what makes it like 18 things in a row went wrong for you, and it's like, it's not like just one situation. It's when you got on the wrong train, you did this and that, and then you picked this when you meant to pick. It's just, those are the ones that really stick out, that it's almost like it's fiction. But
it reminds me.
I think I have more of the opposite of a bad beat, which I guess is like a good win.
Oh God, certainly your story at Arlington. Actually, yeah. If folks don't know, tell that one quickly now, because if you tell that one on the Bad Beat show, you're just going to make people angry. So we can, for folks who don't know, tell that story now. So we don't have to, get people coming after you with pitchforks after the Bad Beat show.
Right. I think what your point is exactly is that I'm usually on the other side of these bad beats, the ones that I remember. That was definitely someone's bad beat. I flew from Saratoga at 7 a.m. in the morning to go to Hawthorne to participate in their tournament on Arlington Million Day. If you've never played in the Hawthorne tournament, you can bet whatever you want, however you want to bet it. There's no rules to that. I had two $350 entries. I was going to play just the pick 5 at Arlington Park. Then me and my buddy Eric were going to drive over to Arlington Park and watch it all there. And if I hit the pick 5, I would win. If I didn't, I wouldn't. I made my first ticket maker bet, and my total was like $705. And I only had $700 to bet. And so what I decided to do is I was going to bet $50 to show on a DRF workout report special named Donegal Moon, who was running at Saratoga as a first-time starter Pletcher horse.
We've heard of him. Owned by one of our listeners.
Bet $50 to show. The horse doesn't run. Knocks my ticket down to like whatever it is, $650. But I had a little backup plan that I just wouldn't have my all 8 tickets as much. Put the bet in. Eric and I grab an adult beverage and head over to Arlington Park. And prices start rolling in, and then it comes to the Beverly D. I used a lot of horses in that race. I singled a couple other spots. I can't remember exactly, but I did not have Secret Gesture. However, I did have What's the Chances, and there was another chat. Anyways,
Stephanie's Kitten. Stephanie's Kitten was the favorite, right?
Right, exactly. I had both of them in, and it was the longest inquiry of my life. I was literally like it was the biggest inquiry of my life because I knew that if I would win this tournament, I would be in command to win the tour. So not only was it a $20,000 situation where if I could hit this pick 5, it was also a $75,000 situation where I was going to win the tour. So essentially that was a $100,000 DQ for me. They took the horse down, and then I was alive to pretty much every favorite for about 20 grand because of the weighted tickets that I had in the Arlington Million, and that is the race. That DQ is what I think won me the tour.
I would agree. And folks, this is the kind of stuff that happens to Jonathon Kinchen. It doesn't happen to you or me. I can count on one hand in my life the number of times I've been put up, let alone put up for close to a 6-figure score. And of course, it was a controversial DQ to say the least. I think Rafe Beckett is still complaining about it in a pub somewhere over in the UK. But that's all right. That's his anti-good beat. That's his anti-bad beat. We want to hear your bad beats. Podcast at drf.com. Send them along to us, and we'll pick a show soon to tell some stories and have a little bit of fun. All right.
Well, and
you go ahead, Mike.
If I could just say, of course, this happens to Jonathon Kinchen and not us, because Jonathon Kinchen is the only one with the Biff Tannen Back to the Future book, right? He knew that DQ was going to happen.
The book might be missing a few pages based on what I've seen this year, folks.
Yeah, it stopped after last year, so.
You're going to turn it around, Jonathon. I'm just teasing. You had a good first day, and I saw you played on day 2 at Santa. You played well. But are you getting frustrated at all with the differences between this year and last?
Yeah, I mean, I think more than getting frustrated with this year, it's like more of an appreciation for last year. You know, just things went my way last year, and things haven't gone my way this year, and you know, it's a long year. You know, I'm complaining. I'm double qualified for the NHC, so it's like it's not like I've had just the worst run, but just a couple of things here and there, and things could be different. So it happens.
That's a winner's.
A nose beat can make the difference between winning and losing for the whole year. So it's a tough game that way, but that's like Pete said, great attitude.
The variance will make you crazy, that's for sure. On to another topic. I just want to reiterate to folks that we are underway with the tournaments.drf.com feeders. We ran our first 2 yesterday to pleasing results from everything that I've heard and read so far. We've got a full slate of activity going throughout the weekend. Check out tournaments.drf.com for all that stuff. We want to see you getting involved. What I really liked about looking at the folks who won out of the feeders, we had some super familiar names in the contest world up there. Former NHC champion Rich Goodall won a berth out of one of the feeders. Mitch Schumann won a berth to the NHC contest this weekend. But I also saw a bunch of names I had no idea who they were. And that's what I'm thinking is going to be the chief benefit of these feeders, is just bringing in more people, allowing experienced players a chance to play during the week for low money, help them manage their bankroll, but also to get some new folks involved. If you're one of those new folks, please check it out and do well on there, and then I can tell your story in the pages of Daily Racing Form and on drf.com. Were you playing yesterday on there, Jonathon? Did any stories come out of it?
Yeah, no, I played. I looked when I first looked for an update. Somebody hit a cap horse, so I stopped paying attention. But yeah, no, it's great, And look, as a non-DRF employee, I'm going to just go out. We didn't even talk about this, so I'm just going to say this. Look, there's going to be some things on this new platform that you guys might have questions about. I saw a tweet today: no alternate picks. Why? Well, here's the reason why, in my opinion, is DRF saw an opportunity to allow players to get involved in these big events on Saturdays and Sundays for cheap dollars, for $18, for $25, and their attention was on getting that opportunity ready for everyone to participate in. And I can assure you that the things that we as players tell them that we would like to see differently, they'll work on getting them changed. But like the whole, I've told you a million times, I hate complainers. If it bothers you, then wait till the all-in format on Saturday and pony up your big boy money. And if you want to play for $18 on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, then deal with it. I would rather have the opportunity to play on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday with no alternates, and I'll just take the post-time favorite. Your alternate wasn't going to run anyways, and instead of having to be forced to pony up $365 for a real opportunity to try to win a seat to Santa Anita or Monmouth or Belmont or the BCBC or the NHC. So that's my pedestal soapbox.
I like it. No, I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. One thing I will say, I agree with Jonathon. Like, there's a big difference between how you let us know your feedback. I don't like complainers either. At the same time, if somebody wants to say, hey, it would be great if you did X, Y, Z, I do want to hear that, and that just enables me to give your feedback to the team inside of DRF. So if you have ideas for improvements, please feel free to relay them. I'll just take them. You can say them in a whiny way if you want. I'll still listen. But it is appreciated when we put on our adult pants and talk about these things in a more sensible way.
Well, and as a DRF employee and as somebody who is not intimately involved in the actual process but has overseen and tested and knows a little bit about some of the decisions being made for the tournament platform, Jonathon's 100% right when he says the goal was to get something. There was a need in the market for these kinds of things. Instead of waiting 3 or 4 months, or I don't even know how long it would be, but instead of waiting to launch a platform that had alternates and had a lot of other things that we know we're going to get at some point, we wanted to get it out there now so that players could take advantage of these small all-in feeders to the bigger contests right now instead of after Saratoga or later this summer. So that's exactly right, Jonathon.
One more point about the all-in format specifically I want to make. This is the format where all the picks need to be in before the first race. Just want to remind folks that these contests do not close when the gates pop. They're closing at the scheduled post time. So be aware of that and make sure you get all your picks in on time, because obviously in the all-in format, you can't change it later. So just something I want folks to keep in mind, that I be aware of the situation. And again, if you have feedback, let us know. We have the tourneyhelp@drf.com email address. You can hit me up on Twitter @loomsboldly. Happy to sort of help you navigate the contest world. And speaking of which, that will be the first question I bring up that came to us via Twitter. This one came from Angie, and she said, I'm fairly new to racing. Can you talk on the podcast about what you recommend for new handicappers / contest players? I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on turf races and maidens. So Jonathon, we're going to have you start with your general answer to that question, and then we'll bandy it about for a little bit. We got plenty of time to talk about this, and I only have one other question I wanted to answer, so we can go fairly in depth here.
Okay, yeah, I think that, I'll start with turf races. We've talked about it a million times. One of the things that I would look at as a new handicapper in turf racing when you're trying to learn more about turf racing is in Formulator clicking on the name of the dam and seeing what the siblings of that horse have done on the turf. Especially in a turf maiden race, that's kind of a double question there. Turf maiden race, that's what I would do. I would focus on the dam of the horse and see how that horse's siblings have run on the turf. Not always wins and losses. One of the things I like to look at is the actual figure that the horse got and compare it to the other figures that the siblings have run. For instance, if the horse is winless on the grass, the siblings are winless on the grass, but they had an 80 turf figure, but there's been 27 runners on the dirt and they've never gone over 60, there's reason to believe that possibly that horse could excel onto the turf. So that's one of just the little things. I mean, then there's obvious just handicapping axioms. You want to look at the pace of turf races and understand how the race was won. That would be the second, obvious one. When it comes to maiden races, one of the things that I would look at is the trainer stats. I think the biggest thing with maidens are how trainers bring their horses into their first start. Some horses will crank their horses and have them ready to run first out. Some guys will give them a race, and typically the trainer stats will tell that. So jump into the trainer stats, start with first-time starters, and then try to get a little bit more specific. First-time starters going 2 turns on the grass. First-time starters going dirt sprints. First-time starters at Saratoga. First-time starters at Del Mar, so on and so forth, and kind of narrow down what it is you're looking for. But I think that in maiden races, the trainers will tell a lot of the things that you need to know. But then I would also never bet a maiden race where there's a clocker report available that I haven't looked at.
That's a great point. Those DRF clocker reports provide invaluable information for maiden races. And Jonathon, I think more than any handicapper I've ever met, uses those efficiently. Do you have any specific advice on how to use those reports? Do you write in the letter grades of the workouts in your PPs? Do you do anything special with that information, Jonathon?
No, I've started doing it a little bit more, writing them in. I actually, like I said, I adjust my game all the time, and our buddy Duke Matisse, I've seen him write them in, and I try to get everything in one place so I don't have to look, open windows, back to windows, closing windows, and so I've been writing them in on my PPs just to kind of, it's been helpful for the last 3 or 4 weeks. The biggest thing, the two things that I would take away from workout reports is not just looking at the letter grade. I think that can be lazy and can lead you in the wrong direction, but actually read what it says, because you can get clues about how that horse is going to run today. I love when it's like a maiden race and the horse gets a B- work, but it says showed huge speed. I think huge speed in a maiden race is like a huge weapon, because now they're going to be clear. You don't have to worry about them being uncomfortable in behind horses. They're going to run on with it, and so the B- won't put too many people on the horse. So actually read the words that are in the workout report. The other thing that we've all had to adjust, people, in my circle that use workout reports, is understanding the difference when you see a horse like Pepin or Takeover Target, or one of these, or Devisadero or whatever, who have worked B- on the dirt. Understand that they're not supposed to look like a B+ horse on the dirt, because they're turf horses. And so I think that's the other thing that I had to teach myself, is that you might see a C+ dirt workout on a turf horse and think that that's a sign that the horse isn't ready to rock and roll. And so those are some of the little things that I'll try to do in using those reports.
That's a great answer. I was actually going to ask you specifically about the turf horse on dirt work situation, so thanks for taking care of that. Mike, this was a two-part question, the one about just general advice for new cappers, contest players, and also the more specific one about turf races, maidens. Answer either part of it you wish.
Well, I will probably answer both, but before I do, I want to just say one more thing about the clocker reports, particularly the DRF clocker reports, and how I use them. One of them is exactly how Duke Matisse used them, as you mentioned in the last show, which is I look at who the horse was working with, and especially if it's a horse I know of. For instance, today there's a maiden working with, Chad Brown maiden working with Last Waltz, who I know is one of Chad Brown's stakes horses. That stands out to me. I want to know that. If there's a maiden working with a stakes filly, I can automatically, regardless of the workout, note how it says B+, A-, C+, it doesn't matter. Just the fact that the trainer thinks enough of that maiden to work it with an established stakes horse is an upgrade for me. That's one of the ways I use it. The other way I use it too is sometimes they'll mention who the jockey was in the workout, which is obviously notable if they're using a name jockey and a regular jockey rather than just an exercise rider. That means that jockey thought enough of the horse to show up in the morning, work the horse, and especially if they're riding that horse in the afternoon, that's great information.
That's a very good point. I remember Mike Maloney telling me back in the day you could just tell some riders would hustle in the morning and get themselves on live mounts, and Calvin Burrell was the example he used. If you saw Calvin working a 2-year-old in the morning and then electing to stick with that horse and ride in the afternoon, those horses would often win at overlaid odds. So I think that's a very good point, Mike. For me, I'll answer the first part of the question and just talk about recommendations for new cappers and contest players. For a new capper, I think that, or for a new contest player, the two places I would say you want to be spending a lot of time are publichandicapper.com and our new tournaments.drf.com feeders. And I'm not just saying this because I work for Daily Racing Form. I really think that at the beginning, you want to be able to get in for no money, as in the free contests on Public Handicapper, or for little money, as in the feeders. When it comes to Public Handicapper, there's also a couple of different tools that can really help you learn. One of them is the ability to read analyses of other players, especially because Public Handicapper will give the lifetime records of the players on there. So you can see that the person whose advice you're reading is a winning player, which to me is just fantastic. So you have a chance to go and see what Chris Larmy, one of the sharpest contest players around, has to say how he thinks about a race. That's only going to help you learn. In addition, you have the opportunity to write your own analysis, which I think is fantastic because, maybe it depends on how your brain works, but for me, I do so much better in races that I have to write about. It forces you to take no shortcuts. When you put your thoughts down on paper, when you're putting yourself out there, for me, it's just going to ensure that I do more work. And for me, in my handicapping, the more work I do, the better the results are. I know that from the records that I keep. So that's something also that you can get on publichandicapper.com. The benefit of the feeders should be obvious. It's a chance to get experience without spending a lot of money. There are folks, whether we're talking about poker or horse racing, who spend the equivalent of a college education learning the game, and that's just not practical for everybody to do. When you're talking about playing in these low-money feeders, you have a chance to get the education you need at an absolute fraction of the cost, and I think that's something folks should be looking at as well. I have some specific advice for new handicappers as well, but I'm going to throw it back to Mike to answer that part of the question. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to, maybe they're intrigued by what they've heard about Formulator, they like the daily racing form, they want to really learn the X's and O's of handicapping? Where would you send them?
Watch races. Just watch as many races as you can. Watch the way the jockeys move. Don't just look at the horses on the lead, but look at the ones making either premature moves or look back in the pack, just to try and pick out ones and how they're running that maybe are running well, but running sneaky good races that don't necessarily translate into wins. The more races you watch, the smarter you get as a horse player, and that was one of the first things that I did. I wanted to watch as many races as I could. The other was handicap as many races as you can, even if you don't bet them, even if you don't have money to bet them. And often I would do it after the races. I would go to the track and pick up a racing form after the day was over because I was 8 or 10 or 12 and I couldn't afford my own. I would grab it. I would go home. I knew the results. I would look at it and say, why did this horse win? Why did this horse outrun their odds? Doing that analysis, it can't help but make you better and smarter. And the third thing I'd say is just listen to players and talk to players. Just pick their brains, learn as much as you can, read the books on handicapping because it can't help but make you better.
Jonathon, you mentioned before that the first handicapping book you read, heck, the first book you said you read cover to cover was Betting Thoroughbreds by Davidowitz. Is that a place you would still recommend for people to start, and are there any other books that leap to mind as ones new players might want to check out?
Yeah, that was one. Buyer on Speed is one that helps you understand the number that we're always focusing on in this game, and that being the speed figure. That was really good. Exotic Betting with Steve Christ it's not so much going to help your handicap.
That's more of like that's like a 201, I think.
That's one that I think is crucial if you ever start to put more than $5 through the window. The Bet with the Best series I thought was really good. It was different authors mixed in, telling different kind of stories or different ideas about the way that they would kind of attack a different angle. And then one of the things that I did was if you're listening, is what you're doing right now, and what I still try to do is I listen to Steve religiously every day for his guests and the people that he would have on and the angles that he would talk about, and hearing people tell why they liked a horse would help me realize that maybe that was something I needed to look at next time I was handicapping. And there's a lot of dead time, not a lot, but a lot of dead time in our lives in cars and, the gym or whatever, and you can just pop that in and try to soak up some of that information. That's definitely something that I would do.
You cut out there at the critical moment. You were plugging the Steve Bick At the Races show, which are also available in podcast form later in the day. You can listen live on stevebick.com. There is no faster way to become a horse racing insider, in my opinion, than to listen to the guests he has on that show. Steve, very respected in the industry. He's put together a stable of very talented people to come on the show. He makes some mistakes. He has me on weekly, but generally speaking, you're going to be getting top quality guests on the big show, and it's a great way to get up to speed. You know, for me, the way I learn, books are critical, and the ones I would mention are Davidowitz. I'd mention the Jim Quinn book that I had the pleasure of helping edit a couple of years ago, The Complete Handicapper, and I'd mention Brad Free's Handicapping 101. If you start listening to people talking about races who know what they're doing, and you read those 3 books, you will be off and running, in my opinion. Jonathan also mentioned Exotic Betting by Steve Christ. I absolutely agree that along with Barry Meadows' Money Secrets at the Racetrack, those are, to me, the 2 holy grail type books. That's not the best. I probably should have picked a book for that analogy, but Gutenberg Bible or something. But when it gets to betting strategy, and that's what our next question is about. This one came in long ago enough that I don't remember who asked it, but the question was, in one of your podcasts, can you guys talk about pick 4 and pick 5 betting, specifically wanting to know what percentage of your bet should be allocated for your all-A ticket versus your 1B, etc. So for folks that might not even be, some folks listening might not even know what any of that means. So Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to explain, just in the most basic terms for readers, what the sort of multi-ticket strategy is, and then maybe answer that specific question about how you allocate the different lines.
So I think the best way to describe it would be, let's just go with like the Breeders' Cup Classic last year, for instance. American Pharoah needed to be, if not your lone A, an A for you in that race. He's the type of horse that has a really good chance of winning, a horse that you have a very strong opinion on, or a horse that you think provides so much value that not using him in a prominent position would make your stomach hurt a little bit. That to me, that's what an A horse is. A B horse is a horse in which you fear can beat you, you think has a likely chance to beat you, but in no way do you feel good about using that horse on an equal playing field as the A horse that we just previously described. For instance, in that race, if you liked FNX, that's great, but there's no reason why you should have bet the same amount of money on FNX that you did on American Pharoah. FNX would be the type that you would use as a B or a C horse. That's kind of my quick basic.
That's a great description. That's actually really well described. And the idea here is that in the old school sort of caveman ticket where you're just going, I'm just going to use the pick 3 for an example, 3 horses by 3 horses by 3 horses. It's a very inefficient way to bet. And by grading the horses as A's, B's, and C's, you play many different tickets where you're weighting the different combinations in the form of A, B, and C. For much more on this multi-ticket strategy stuff, check out Exotic Betting by Steve Christ. There's also a really cool DVD, if you can find it. The book, I believe, we still have in the DRF store, and it's going to give you a ton of information on that. Mike, to answer that specific question, do you know in the standard ticket maker model, how much more percent-wise of your bank does ticket maker suggest that you spend on your all A line versus your A and B line?
Well, it depends upon the wager. I think if you're asking specifically in the algorithm of the system, I think it is set up to not increase any $2 pick 6 play, because it's not necessarily set up to have you hit that more than once. The goal with something like that is to take down the pick 6 rather than have it for 5 times. But what it does in smaller, in like the pick 5 and the pick 4, pick 3, is it usually will say weight your all A line twice as much as your A's with 1B, and then your A's with 2 B's and your A's with 1 C a little less than that. What I do personally, and I know Jonathan's even more bold than this, is I will probably do the all A's with 2 B's. I'll do that for the minimum. I will do the all A's with 1 C for the minimum as well, because those are by definition they're not my strongest opinions. The all A's with 1B, I will usually do for twice the minimum, sometimes 3 times, depending upon how I feel within the sequence. And then my all A line, I might do for 5 or 10 times the minimum if it's if I'm not using 3 A's in each leg, and if my budget can stand it. That's generally my approach, Jonathan. I know you'll often go even stronger.
Jonathon likes to crush their souls. I'll let him explain how he does that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to feel the sequence out individually and actually take time to look back through it and look at who and see who your B horses are. Because sometimes what will happen with me is I'll look and I'll see that my B horses are 5 to 2 shots, and I'll say to myself, if it comes 2 B horses with 5 to 2 shots, I don't want that 2B ticket, so I'm not going to spend the money on it. I'll just lose. Because I think in the long run you'll end up losing more if you continue to play all those combinations that aren't going to really reward you. So I would look back and see in your mind, if this thing comes 2B, is it going to actually pay me? And if it's not going to pay you, then I usually don't play the 2B ticket where it's A with 2 Bs, allowing you to, I guess, to be kind of wrong twice. What I typically will do in those situations is I'll press up my A and my A with 1B ticket. And just when you're right, you want, like I said, when we're wrong a lot more in this game than we are right, and when I'm right, I try to make them pay for it. Unfortunately, it backfires from time to time, as it can result in some pretty long, really long droughts and whatever. But the times that you get them, it's worth it. So you just have to feel it out, what your comfort zone is, and how you play. And I typically don't have more than 5 A's in a race, and so my tickets are always something that I can multiply without getting too crazy.
I'm going to jump in real.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to jump in real quick and say that's a good point, Jonathan, about the A's with 2B. If you're talking about a pick 3, I'm going to approach it differently than if I'm talking about a pick 5.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. But the system, in the ticket maker system, it treats it the same. So that's a fabulous point, because A's with 2 B's in a pick 3 means you've only got one winner, right? So yeah, I'm kind of with you on that.
One of the other things that I've noticed that I've been wanting to say out loud for a while, and I don't know if I've said it, but if you're a person who plays the all ticket in a pick 4 or pick 5, or someone who plays the all ticket in a pick 4 or pick 5, here's what I'm just pleading that you do. I'm begging you to, if there's 10 horses in the race, take 5 of them and use them as A horses, and the other 5 and use them as B horses. Just do something a little bit different than just using the 5 to 2 shot and the 68 to 1 shot with the same value. Unless you like the 68 to 1 shot, then make him an A horse. But just at least do half and half if you're going to push the all button, where you're weighing the 5 more likely of the 10 higher than the other 5.
I'd go a step farther and say, some of those should probably just be C's, who you only get if everything else goes right. But I think that's a great point. The more you can do to weight your opinion, the more you can have the exact construction of your bets reflect your opinion of a sequence, the better off you're going to be. The ticket maker methodology is great. The person who asked this question, for all I know, they don't even know about ticket maker. The great thing is you don't really have to decide how to weight your bet. Ticket maker will do it for you. Which of the ways to access ticket maker do we recommend? There's a couple of different ways, Mike. Tell people what they are, and then I'll continue my spiel about it.
Well, the easiest one is just drfticketmaker.com, but you can also get a link from Formulator, has a link to an older version of Ticketmaker at the top. Many like to use that. I sometimes still use that. They both have their pluses and minuses. The drfticketmaker.com one is really great day of, because it updates with scratch information and live odds if it's the first leg of a multi-race sequence. So it gets a lot of good tote data. And it has the names of the horses as well as the saddlecloth number, and sometimes I'll get stupid and mix up the 3 or the 5 if I'm just looking at numbers. So those are the 2 main ways to access them.
So with Ticketmaker, you can put in your budget, you can select your horses, and it will tell you how to weight the lines. So that's something that a player especially is going to do. Once you get comfortable with that, I do recommend not necessarily being a slave to Ticketmaker. I think what you should do, or I don't know what you should do, what I do is maybe I'll allocate 80% of the bet to, I'll tell Ticketmaker 80% of my real budget and let it give me my sort of widest spreads. And then I'll want to come back with 20% of my money where typically I'll use that to just be super aggressive on my strongest opinions that might involve, making a grade that doesn't really exist within Ticketmaker. Maybe for that ticket, I'll elevate a couple of horses to an A+ type level and really try to crush that line Kinchen style. The other thing I'll do sometimes is use Ticketmaker to construct. This gets a little complicated, but I do believe it's worth the effort. Sometimes I'll use Ticketmaker to construct two separate tickets on the same sequence, where I'll basically say, if one of these two horses wins that I have a really strong opinion about in this sequence, I really want to have it. So I'll do it twice. In one instance, with one horse as the lone A, no B's, no C's, and then in another race, do the same exact thing and build a ticket with this other horse, lone A, no B's, no C's, and play both those combinations in an effort to basically say, if one of my two strong opinions wins, I want to hit this thing if I'm even close in the other leg. So there's a lot of different clever ways you can do it. Ticketmaker is a great way to get started, and then you can eventually build on it from there. Do either of you guys have any further thoughts about wagering strategy? Jonathan, we'll start with you.
Cool thing else you can do with Ticketmaker that I've done from time to time is on big days especially, if you're looking at the late pick 5, don't use B horses in the first leg, because if you get beat, you can just play the pick 4 back, save that money on the B horse combinations, and just and hope that you get to one of your A horses, and then you're alive to all the B situations moving forward in the pick 4 with the remaining 4 races. If not, you get beat, you play the pick 4 back. It's one of the things I've done in the past, try to save a little bit of money.
I like that. Mike, how about you? Any last thoughts on wagering strategy?
One of the things I like to do with the multi-race wagers is single horses in the payoff legs, especially if you have a horse that you think is, let's say, Jonathan likes to mention Divisadero. He's a great example because Divisadero, I think was 15-1 on the morning line, and we knew that was not going to be the case in the actual betting, right? Or is he 12-1? Some crazy number. He ended up going less than half that in the actual win odds. So if you're excited and looking to bet Divisadero, and then the tote opens and you see 4-1, oh boy, maybe I don't bet because I don't like him at that price. You can try to get alive to him and lock in value in the pick 3s, the pick 4s, or whatever multi-race sequence is ending with that race. And oftentimes you will get much, much closer to the morning line odds than the actual win odds if you're able to do that. So that's kind of the counterpoint to what Jonathan said about going skinny in the first leg. Sometimes you want to do the opposite, where you get wide, you use your opinions, you use your A's and B's, and then you do a single lone A in the last leg on a horse that you're really excited about playing that day.
As for Jonathan always mentioning Divisadero, if a horse helped me win $150,000, I'd be mentioning him all the time too. It's like when I talked to our friend and colleague Mike Watchmaker, who on numerous occasions has told me the story of seeing Jimi Hendrix live, and he said to me at one time, like, do I bring that story up too much about seeing Hendrix live? You get bored hearing that story? I say, no way, man. If I saw Jimi Hendrix live, everybody I met for the rest of my life would be hearing about that story every day. I don't think you talk about it enough. Jonathan, likewise, I don't think you talk about Divisadero enough.
He's lucky my left sleeve of my tattoo is full, or he'd be on there somewhere.
Fantastic. All right. Any final thoughts on anything today, guys, before we send it home?
Well, I think the only other thing to mention, Pete, is you and I have a webinar later today where we will be going over in depth the new DRF tournament site. That will be available for archive. Obviously, most of the people listening to this will not be able to sign up and see the webinar live, but that will be available after the fact on drf.com/YouTube.
Excellent, excellent. Jonathan, any chance of you getting out of your other meeting and crashing that call later, or you think you're pretty much out?
I think I'm pretty much out. We'll see if the stars align, but it's probably not likely. I'm going to bring my computer, and if I have to run to a Starbucks, if I do slip out early, then I'll let you guys know.
Let me know. In case you don't make it, I'll actually ask you to just give your we talked about Cliff Notes before. This will be your Cliff Notes handicapping answer to what I plan on spending some time in the webinar later today talking about, which is specific strategy for the all-in contest format where all the picks have to be in before the first race. What general advice would you give to somebody who's not used to playing in a contest that way?
For me, the biggest thing that I do is you're allowed to just pick winners, because you're not going to have to deal with people chasing and bombing away at you later. So you can just pick winners. So that's the first thing I think that's different, is you just want to have winners in those situations. The second thing is that you have to have a little bit of your crystal ball out and have an idea of where those odds are going to go, because there's nothing more frustrating than picking a horse at 6-1 in an all-in tournament, and when they go off, the horse is 5-2, and you wish you would have played the 10-1 shot that you kind of liked. So try to be aware of that. That's the biggest thing for me, is just picking winners and having a little bit more of a prediction on what's going to happen with the odds, because like I said, you're not going to have an opportunity to change it.
Have you ever had a situation where you didn't play a 6-1 thinking the horse was going to be 2-1, and it ended up going off at 6-1 anyway, and you cursed yourself that way?
Yeah, it happens all the time, but I try not to overthink it. One of the things that I've heard from someone asked me the other day at Santa Anita, they just asked me for my opinion. They said, "Do you think you need to pick a bomb in the last race of an all-in?" And I said, "No, not at all. You need to pick a winner." I know that I credited the Secret Gesture DQ for the Tour win last year, but one of my outright online wins, which was extremely helpful in getting into the position I was in, I used American Pharoah in the 20-horse Derby field and passed our friend Ryan Flanders for an outright win on Derby Day on an NHC qualifier. So like my man always says, Paul Sherman, play what you like.
I wonder if that frustrating beat to you on a favorite is part of the reason our friend Ryan Flanders quit the game, Jonathon.
No, I think he's got some other big things he's working on, and so I think that's probably why he decided to take some time off.
He's done very well in the NHC Tour, and he's a fantastic player, and he's very busy with his family and some business opportunities. I keyed. All right, folks, that's enough for this one. Really appreciate everybody joining us today. I want to thank Jonathon Kinchen. I want to thank Mike Hogan. Most of all, thank all of you, the listeners. Send in those bad beat stories. We're going to be back next week, and may you win all your photos. 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 All your photos.